In our last 3 adventures, we tried to save our crazy principal from disaster. He thought he was a real superhero, but he wasn't. We didn't think things could get any worse, but they did. The top secret truth about Captain Underpants, all new. Once upon a time, there were 2 cool kids named George and Harold. We are awesome. Me too. They had a mean old principal named Mr. Krupp. Blah, blah, blah. Mr. Krupp was very mean to George and Harold. Blah, blah, blah. So they bought the 3D hypno ring. They used it to hypnotize Mr. Krupp. You will obey us. Okie dokie. But then they made a terrible mistake. You are now Captain Underpants. Haha. Okay. Hey, come back, Mr. Krupp. Tra-la-la. Mr. Krupp thought he really was Captain Underpants, but he didn't have any superpowers. Stop, you big dummy. They had a lot of adventures, but one time they even got attacked by a UFO. Uh-oh. They all got took into his spaceship, and George stole some alien superpower juice. Then Mr. Krupp got eaten by a big, evil dandelion. You had to be there. So George gave him some superpower juice. Then he got superpowers. Now Captain Underpants has amazing strength. He can even fly, too. Holy cow! The only way George and Harold can stop Captain Underpants from causing trouble is by pouring water on his head. This makes him turn back into Mr. Krupp. Hey, Bob! But beware, because whenever Mr. Krupp hears somebody snap their fingers, snap, snap, he turns back into you-know-who. Tra-la-la! Oh no, here we go again. The end? Chapter 1, George and Harold. This is George Beard and Harold Hutchins. George is the kid on the left with the tie and the flat top. Harold is the one on the right with the t-shirt and the bad haircut. Remember that now. Jerome Horwitz Elementary. Don't underestimate our good teachers. All of the experts at Jerome Horwitz Elementary School had their opinions about George and Harold. Their guidance counselor, Mr. Rected, thought the boys suffered from ADD. The school psychologist, Miss Labor, diagnosed them with ADHD. And their mean old principal, Mr. Krupp, thought they were just plain old BAD. Bad. But if you ask me, George and Harold simply suffered from IBSS, incredibly boring school syndrome. You see, George and Harold weren't really bad kids. They were actually bright, good-natured boys. Their only problem was that they were bored in school, so they took it upon themselves to liven things up for everybody. Wasn't that thoughtful of them? Jerome Horwitz Elementary. Our teachers don't use deodorant. Unfortunately, George and Harold's thoughtfulness got them into trouble every now and then. Sometimes it got them into a lot of trouble, and one time it got them into so much trouble it almost caused the entire planet to be taken over by a ruthless, maniacal, mad scientist guy in a giant robot suit. But before I can tell you that story, I have to tell you this story. Chapter 2, All Hail New Swissland! As everybody knows, New Swissland is a small country just southeast of Greenland. You probably know all about New Swissland's natural resources and systems of government, but here's something about New Swissland that I'll bet you didn't know. Everybody in New Swissland has a silly name. Just ask their president, the Honorable Chuckles Jingleberry McMonkeyburger Jr., or his lovely wife Stinky. They'll tell you all about New Swissland's proud silly name heritage. They'll tell you about the cultural significance of silly names, and then they'll probably tell you a really, really long, boring story of how this stupid tradition got started. We'll skip that part, okay? Just remember that everybody in New Swissland has a silly name, from the richest to the poorest, from the dumbest to the smartest. And speaking of the smartest, let me introduce you to Professor Pip-Pee Poopy Pants. That's a statue of him down there in the bottom right-hand corner of the page. Now, Pip-Pee Poopy Pants was probably the smartest person of all New Swissland. He graduated at the head of his class at Chunky Cube Burger Nose University, and afterwards spent all of his time creating wild and fantastic inventions. Let's look in on him, shall we? Jiggles T. Chunky Skunks, Tipper Q. Zipper Dripper, I Wanna Go to the Bathroom, and Professor Pip-Pee Poopy Pants. Back in his private laboratory, Professor Pip-Pee Poopy Pants was just putting the finishing touches on his 2 wonderful new inventions, the Shrinky Pig 2000 and the Goosey Girl 4000. Professor Poopy Pants called for his assistant, Pork Belly Funky Skunk. Mr. Funky Skunk, Pip yelled, I am now ready to test my new inventions. Pork Belly took notes while the professor aimed his Shrinky Pig 2000 at a hideous pile of trash. Zerk! A powerful beam of energy blasted the garbage heap. Suddenly, the large pile of trash shrank to the size of a gumball. Hooray! It works! Cried Professor Poopy Pants. Now I must try the Goosey Girl 4000. Pippi and Pork Belly aimed at the Goosey Girl 4000 at an ordinary hot dog with mustard. Glizert! Went another bright beam of energy. Suddenly, the hot dog grew and grew until it crashed through the walls of the laboratory. We did it! Exclaimed Pork Belly. What do you mean we? Yelled Professor Poopy Pants. I did it. I'm the genius. You're just a lowly assistant. And don't you forget it. Sorry, boss, said Pork Belly. With these two inventions, exclaimed Professor Poopy Pants, I will be able to solve the world's garbage problem and create enough food for everyone on the entire planet. Finally, it looked as if all the Earth's dilemmas would be fixed forever. But who would have believed that in just a few short weeks, Professor Poopy Pants would be trying to take over the planet in a fit of frenzied rage? Well, dear readers, the tragic tale is about to unfold, but before I can tell you that story, I have to tell you this story. Chapter 3, The Field Trip. Jerome Horwitz Elementary School was having its big annual field trip to Pico Pizza Palace. All the kids had bought their permission slips and were lined up to get on the bus. George and Harold could hardly wait to eat pizza and play video games all afternoon. This is gonna rule, said George. Yeah, if we ever get there, said Harold. Hey, said George, let's change the letters around on the school sign while we're waiting. Good idea, said Harold. So George and Harold ran over to the sign and began their, thoughtfulness. Unfortunately, the boys didn't notice a dark, foreboding presence lurking nearby in the bushes. Aha! Cried Mr. Crop. I caught you boys red-handed. Oh, said George. Heh, laughed Harold. This is just a little joke. A joke? Yelled Mr. Crop. Do you boys think that's funny? George and Harold thought for a moment. Well, yeah, said George. Don't you? Asked Harold. No, I don't think it's funny, yelled Mr. Crop. I think it's rude and offensive. That's why it's funny, said George. Please don't fart in a diaper. Oh, said Mr. Crop, you boys like to laugh, huh? Well, here's a good one. You two are officially banned for the school field trip. Instead of eating pizza, you'll spend the afternoon cleaning up the teacher's lounge. Isn't that funny? No way, said Harold. That's not funny at all, said George. That's cruel and unusual punishment. That's why it's funny, Mr. Crop snarled. Chapter 4, Left Behind. Mr. Crop marched George and Harold over to the janitor's closet. You can use these supplies to clean the teacher's lounge, said Mr. Crop. I want it spotless by the time we get back. Mr. Crop went back outside, climbed onto the school bus, and laughed loudly at the buses pulled away. The teachers all pointed at George and Harold and laughed, too. Rats, said Harold. I thought we were going to have fun today. We can still have fun, said George. All we need is a slather, that bag of powdered paste, and those big boxes of styrofoam wormy thingies. So George and Harold carried their supplies to the teacher's lounge and got down to business. At the sink, George pulled the sprayer nozzle while Harold carefully taped the sprayer handle in the on position. Then the two boys put the nozzle back, making sure the sprayer head was pointed in the right direction. Next, George held the ladder steadily while Harold climbed up to the ceiling fan. There, he began scooping generous amounts of powdered paste onto the tops of the fan blades. Is this right? Asked Harold. Yeah, said George. Try to get most of it on the ends of the blades. Got it, said Harold. George closed all the blinds while Harold adjusted the ceiling fan so it would turn on when the lights came on. Finally, the boys filled the refrigerator up with worm-shaped styrofoam packaging pellets. This is going to be fun, said Harold. Not for the teachers, laughed George. Chapter 5, The Fun Begins. An hour or so later, the buses returned to the school. All the children got off, packed up their stuff, and got ready to go home. Mr. Fide, the science teacher, was on school bus duty. The rest of the teachers gathered around George and Harold and began teasing them. "You kid sure did miss a fun field trip," said Ms. Ribble. "The pizza was so delicious. Too bad you didn't get any." "I wanted to bring you back a pizza," said Mr. Meaner, "but I ate it on the bus." He threw an empty pizza box at George and Harold's feet, and the teachers howled with laughter. "Maybe you can lick the cheese off the box," Mr. Krupp roared. The teachers eventually got tired of taunting George and Harold, so they retreated to the teachers' lounge to relax. "Hey, how come it's so dark in here?" asked Mr. Meaner. As he flicked on the lights, the ceiling fan began rotating very slowly. Ms. Ribble went to the sink and turned on the faucet. Suddenly, the spray nozzle sprayed cold water all over her. "Ah!" she screamed. "Somebody turn the water off!" The other teachers sprang up and tried to help. They all got sprayed too. The ceiling fan was rotating faster now, and some of the powdered paste had begun flying off the fan blades. The teachers struggled with the faucet, pushing and shoving each other. Finally, somebody turned the water off, but not before everyone was thoroughly soaked. The ceiling fan was now spinning at full speed. All the powder on the fan blades had been flung off, and it was now floating down onto the wet teachers. "Hey, what the?" cried Mr. Meaner. "What's all the sticky stuff?" yelled Miss Anthrope. By now, all the teachers were covered in gooey, sticky paste. It didn't take a genius to know that George and Harold were behind all this. "Those brats better not touch my diet soda!" Miss Ribble shouted. She dashed to the refrigerator and swung the door open. Swish! Suddenly, thousands of tiny styrofoam pellets flew out into the room. The wind from the ceiling fan blew the pellets around and around. Naturally, they landed on the stickiest things in the room. The teachers! "Ah!" screamed the teachers. They ran out of the teachers' lounge, screaming and yelling. George and Harold saw what looked like a group of giant evil snowmen heading straight toward them. "I got a good idea," said George. "What?" asked Harold. "Run!" said George. Chapter 6. Bye-bye, Mr. Fide. The next day, George and Harold's science teacher, Mr. Fide, knocked on Mr. Krupp's door. "What do you want?" barked Mr. Krupp. I've come to resign," said Mr. Fide. I just can't take it anymore." "Now hold on, Bob," said Mr. Krupp. "Being a teacher is hard work. You can't just quit your job when things aren't—" "You don't understand," said Mr. Fide. "I think I'm cracking up." "What do you mean?" asked Mr. Krupp. "Well," said Mr. Fide, "it all started a few months ago when I had this dream that I got eaten up by a talking toilet. Then I started hearing cats and dogs meowing and growling in the classroom. Then I imagined that the school got flooded with sticky green goop, and just yesterday I thought I saw a group of abominable snowmen chasing two boys down the hallway." "Now wait just a minute, Morty," said Mr. Krupp. "All that can be explained." "And a few days ago," said Mr. Fide, "I thought I saw a big fat bald guy in his underwear fly out the window." "Holy cow," said Mr. Krupp. "You are crazy." So Mr. Fide handed in his resignation and left Jerome Horwitz Elementary School for the greener pastures of the Pico Valley home for the reality challenged. "Now where am I going to find a new science teacher on such short notice?" said Mr. Krupp. "Where, oh where?" Chapter 7. Here, oh here. Remember that Poopy Pants guy I was telling you about back in Chapter 2? Well, things hadn't been going too well for him in the past several weeks. Professor Poopy Pants had come to America to share the Shrinky Pig 2000 and the Goosey Girl 4000 with the world. But nobody seemed to want to hear about his inventions. They were all too busy laughing at his silly name. Ha 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 ha! Poor Pippy Poopy Pants had been laughed out of every major scientific institution in the U.S. He'd been giggled out of Georgetown, howled out of Harvard, yucked out of Yale, snickered out of Stanford, and chuckled out of Chattanooga State Technical Community College. Professor Poopy Pants was running out of money, and there was no place left for him to turn. Then, one day, the professor walked into a New York coffee shop and picked up a newspaper. And like a message from heaven, Pippy Poopy Pants found his answer. "That's it!" he cried. "I'll become an elementary school science teacher. I'll work really hard, and soon people will come to respect me and see what a genius I am. Then I can introduce my great inventions to the world." Pippy Poopy Pants was certain that the one place people wouldn't laugh at his name was was at an elementary school. Kids are so accepting and loving, he said. You can always count on the sweetness and innocence of children. Chapter 8. The Sweetness and Innocence of Children. Hello, boys and girls, said the professor a week later. I'm going to be your new science teacher. My name is Professor Pee Poopy Pants. Ha 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 ha! Alright, settle down, boys and girls. Yes, it's a funny name, I know, but let me explain how I got this name. Please, children, settle down. It's not that funny, let me assure you. Boys and girls, please stop laughing. Alright, I'm going to count to 10, and when I'm done, I want all of you to quiet down so we can learn about the wonderful world of science. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 9.5. Children, please stop laughing. I know you're all very far behind in your lessons and we've got a lot of catching up to do. Boys and girls, stop it. I'm not going to tell you again. It's not funny. There's no reason at all for you to be laughing at my name. I'm sure we all have funny names if you think about it. Stop it right now. Okay, boys and girls, I'll just wait until you all settle down. I can wait. A week later, things hadn't gotten any better. Professor Poopy Pants was really beginning to get angry. How am I going to get through to these children? He asked himself. Hey, I've got it. I'll create a wonderful new invention.